concentrate on the presentation. Okay, thank you, Malik Shah.
I am not able to. 1 minute, I think I have to.
Share it.
That's what I did.
You can
That
just
one.
open the PPT, sir. You can just open
PPT, I
the
opened the PPT. Okay.
No, you have to put that click one arrow,
Yes, I've done that one.
and then PPT you have to open.
Yeah. Okay. Are you able to see?
No, not yet come. Still,
Not yet. Okay.
Sir, you haven't shared the screen, sir. You need to share the screen again, sir.
you have to share the screen, and then one window will come. You have to click on that window.
Okay.
That arrow is there. No, after
Yeah, I did that one, entire screen. Okay. Share.
yeah, now it may be coming. Yes.
Yeah. Is it coming?
Yes, sir. Now you just have to open the PPT, sir, and full screen, sir.
PPT you have to open.
That's what I did.
Yes, sir. No, sir. Again, it went off, sir.
Now your entire screen. Okay. Now, okay. Share.
Sharing is coming. Now it came.
Now done.
Now you
Okay.
can make it full.
Yeah.
Slightly.
From control. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Sorry for the a bit confusion. So today's topic of my presentation is satellite system engineering. I am going to cover the following points. What is system engineering? System engineering applied to satellites. What are the technical requirements? What are interfaces? What's different about space systems? System engineering applied to satellite configurations. A few examples. Satellite system performance validation. Emerging trends towards small and nanosat and related technologies, and a few words concluding. Now, what is system? System definition in general, it consists of various elements or subsystems. You can see in the picture, a system is there, and the entire subsystems constitute a full system. Each of the elements or subsystems perform very specific functions and interact with each other subsystems in a particular defined manner. In simple words, an engineered system can be defined as combination of components, elements, or subsystems that work in synergy to collectively perform a useful desired function. This is just a simple definition. We'll come into details later. Now, there's another thing called family of systems or system of systems. Most modern systems are typically made of one or more systems. In the picture you see, there's a surveillance sensor, a satellite having a surveillance sensor. There's a communication satellite. There's a fighter aircraft. There's a ground station which receives the data, processes it, and sends a signal to the spacecraft, to the fighter aircraft. Each of these systems are complete by themselves. Okay, but together they form a system. For example, a surveillance sensor takes a picture of the enemy target, sends the data to the ground station processes the data, and the data and the processed data, the target information, the target coordinates are sent to the communication satellite, which in turn transmits it to the shooter aircraft, and aircraft fires a missiles at the target. So this is what is called system of systems. Each system is doing a specific job, and together they form a complete system. What is system engineering? Systems engineering is an integrative discipline and follows a very methodical, multidisciplinary approach for the design, realization, management, and operation of the system over their life cycles. Task of interdisciplinary approach to engineering system is inherently very complex because the behavior and interaction among components and subsystem is not always well defined or understood a priori. In a way, it is quite an iterative process, understanding and resolving issues related to the effect of the design and performance of one subsystem on another subsystem, and consequently on the overall objectives of the mission. Over time, as the activities progress, clarity gets evolved, problems are analyzed, requirements change, the design gets modified. Basically, what it means is, like I said, it consists of several subsystems. And when you say, for example, a system, in the beginning, you specify very broadly what the system is supposed to do. And then that's a very broad definition. And then you have to assign the task to the different subsystems. Different subsystems are elements, and then their interaction, their design, there are you start from from zero condition without any prior knowledge or prior understanding. So as the system goes along, you understand the system, you define the system, you modify the system as and when the problems come. So this is the task of system engineering. Some of the tools and methods that can be used to better comprehend and manage complexity in the system engineering are system modeling and simulation, optimization, system dynamics and analysis, statistical analysis, reliability analysis, and prediction. So there are, for example, there are very many, analytical tools available, softwares available, for example, ANSYS for structural analysis, similarly STK for orbital, MATLAB is available for control simulation, and like that, there are hosts of satellites and tools are available for carrying out the analysis and evaluating the performance of the subsystem and the systems. System engineering applied to satellites. Now, satellite systems can be broadly divided into 4 segments: customer segment, mission segment, ground segment, and space segment. So I will deal with each of this in a brief manner. The customer segment includes all aspects of the required or offered services. For example, customer will broadly specify what for the satellite he wants. Say, for example, in the field of communications, services can be divided into 4 categories: telecommunication, TV broadcasting, audio broadcasting, data transmission. Customer defines top-level requirements, high-level requirements, which the interacting ground and the space segments are supposed to meet. Okay, customer says, I want satellite for communication, broadcasting, this and that. Now, these customer requirements have to be translated into payload functional requirements. As an example, The communication payloads requirements can be broadly specified in terms of the number of channels or transponders, EIRP requirement, that is a signal strength received on the ground, or this uplink requirements at how much power you need to transmit for the satellite to receive the signal, area of coverage on the ground, that is the beam width, the direction of the beam to be transmitted to the ground, frequency reuse or multi-beam requirements, beam steerability, orbiter slot, whether you're co-locating with other satellites, and RF interference, if any, etc. Now, these are the broad requirements which in turn dictate the satellite parameters. For example, power generation requirements, because how many transponders you have, what is the power consumed by the each transponder, and then total power. So that will dictate what is the power requirements to be generated. So that will also dictate solar array size and the battery size during eclipse. Now, this also requires bus formation. That is whether you want to operate these devices at 42 volts, 70 volts, 100 volts. Currently, most of these communication transponders, communication payload works at a 100-volt bus because of the efficiency. The I square R losses are minimized, so that's why they are preferred to use at 100 volts. Then power generated by the solar array has to be brought into the spacecraft bus inside the spacecraft. Okay, now that is done through the solar array drive mechanism. Solar array drive is that it points the solar array towards the sun as the satellite rotates in the orbit. Now, this power transfer takes place through the slip ring assembly that will govern the physical size of the solar array, current capability of the slip rings, etc. Then the most important thing will be equipment layout and thermal dissipation design in terms of heat pipe layout, planning, etc. And of course, the most important thing is the spacecraft pointing requirements, especially for multi-beams. Multi-beams are very narrow beams. For example, when you transmit a signal from 36,000 kilometer geostationary orbit, about 1 degree of error, okay, will shift the beam by almost 700 kilometers. So when you have very narrow beams covering small areas, multiple beams, the pointing errors has to be very, very low. So the pointing requirements get very, very stringent especially for a multi-beam satellite. Then of course the orbital co-location strategies. Another example is the imaging payload, for which the requirements can be broadly specified as the payload requirement, spectral and spatial resolution. Spectral means whether you want to take the image in the visible band or the IR band or near IR band. So that's what defines the spectral. Then spatial resolution. That is, when you take a picture from space, each pixel should cover or represent what area, whether 1 meter by 1 meter, half meter by half meter, or 0.25 by 0.2. So these are what has to be specified by the payload. Then swath. Each frame should cover how much area on the ground. Okay. So repeatability, how often you should be able to come and take the picture of the same area, okay, after how many orbits or after how many days. Then the field of view requirements. These requirements in turn dictate the requirement on the platform pointing and stability, What is the data volume? That is, once you have, very small, very high resolution, you should be able to take a picture with 0.25 or 0.10 centimeter resolution. The quantum of data become very high. So the storage requirement becomes high. Then the transmission rate becomes very high. So all these things, and from which orbit height you are taking the picture, orbit height and increase selection, these are the parameter which gets derived from the payload requirements. Then the mission segment. Mission segment basically deals with the orbit selection, the launch vehicle selection, and the constellation design. Okay, so I have shown in this picture the three segments, three parts: orbit or geometry, launcher, and constellation. Orbit means the spacecraft communication satellite, for example, is injected into a geostationary transfer orbit. From there, it has to be brought to geostationary Earth orbit. So it has to go through a set of maneuvers. So the spacecraft maneuver planning would require the equation of motion of satellite in orbit, including various perturbation, thrusting acceleration, etc., to optimally arrive at the strategy to raise the orbit. And the sensors, particularly, for the attitude control, would require, when you're using sun sensor or earth sensor, a particular geometry. That means at the same time you should be able to see the sun. Sensor should be able to see the sun and the earth together, and give you 3-axis attitude information. So geometry, sun earth satellite geometry becomes very important. Then, of course, other important aspect is, from the ground, you should be able to send the telecommand, receive the telemetry data from the satellite, and that also forms a part of mission segment studies. And after analyzing this relation, it is possible to assess the impact of the orbit definition on the whole satellite system, and hence select the optimal orbit. And that optimal orbit, particularly for the remote sensing or imaging satellite mission. Continuing with that one, the ground segment represents the entire earthbound infrastructure to operate the satellite and end user devices. It includes satellite control center, which is equipped with TT&C and ranging equipment, large steerable antennas to transmit telecommands and receive the telemetry and carry out ranging, and the ground software called SCHEMAX. Basically, it processes the telemetry data and displays the satellite health parameters with various plotting options. Then, of course, the payload and satellite in orbit testing equipment. User customer data reception, for example, you see, we have small dishes in each house receiving the satellite data directly, and that represents the user or customer data reception terminals. The next one is the space segment. Space segment consists of the satellite, basically. A satellite system is typically made of one or more satellites as a part of a system. See, there may be two satellites co-located, means very close to each other. Both the satellites together form a system, means the number of transponders would be doubled. Okay, so each will have a certain number of things. If you have two satellites co-located, then the number of transponders from the same location is doubled. So that's why one satellite or more satellites. Each satellite consists of two elements. One is called the payload, other is called the bus. The bus system consists of attitude determination control systems, propulsion system, power generation and batteries, telemetry tracking and telecommand system, structure and thermal control, then ground support equipment. The ground support equipment describes all the elements needed to manufacture, handle, and check out the satellite from production to launch. The payload that provides the basic mission capabilities such as communications, surveillance, navigation, etc., includes the communication equipment, the transponders, receivers, etc., or the imaging systems, imaging cameras, as the case may be. Another very important aspect of the customer requirement is the total useful life of the satellite. Currently, the useful life of the satellite is required to be 15 years. Okay. This shows a pictorial view of the satellites, various elements, and here, of course, you see the equipment panel is there, which houses all the electronic elements, all the payload elements, the thrusters. This shows the central cylinder, which is a load-bearing element during the launch. Okay, and inside the cylinder are the two tanks. This which contains the propellant. This is for the bipropellant system. One is oxidizer and one is the fuel. And these are solar arrays, various antennas for TT&C, sensors, etc. Okay, this picture represents the various elements of the spacecraft. Launch vehicle constraints are limiting factors in the design of satellites. There are two basic limitations are there from the launch vehicle. One is the lift-off mass capability of the launch vehicle. Other is the physical dimension and stay-out area of the launch vehicle fairing. This is the fairing, okay, within which the satellite is accommodated. Once this fairing is fixed, the satellite dimensions are fixed because you need certain stay-out areas. Okay, so this dimensions gets fixed and the mass gets fixed. So, okay, now the size which gets fixed, it imposes a restriction on the how many transponders you can accommodate on this spacecraft. What is the size of antennas you can accommodate? Here it shows one antenna is deployed. Okay, many times antennas. So this antenna size is within the fairing size is so okay. But if the box is very big, if the satellite box the box is very big, then you can't have a deployed antenna. You have to antenna which are folded on the spacecraft, and they have to be accommodated within the fairing size. This picture shows the antennas are folded and in the folded condition and touching the equipment panel. Okay. So, okay, which I said, overall dimension restricts number of transponders, number and size of antennas, and propellant tank sizing, which may constrain the life of the satellite. Okay, so the spacecraft, there is an interface ring mounted in the spacecraft, which is used to interface with the launch vehicle. So that interface ring dimensions are standard. So the cylinder dimension becomes standard. Within the cylinder, you have to accommodate the tanks. Now, the only way you can do is you can make the tank, instead of spherical, you can have two hemispheres. In between there is a cylinder within the constraints of the total volume which is permissible. Okay. Now, physical size also, once you have many number of transponders and each transponder is a high power, they produce heat, wasteful heat. So that has to be dissipated to the space. So physical size limitation, there are passive means and there are active means. Passive means uses blankets, paints, heat pipes. Heat pipes is transfers the heat from the hot spot to the low temperature area, and then it dissipates to the space. Now, many times, what the physical limitation constrains the total area which can be used for mounting the heat shield, mounting the heat pipes, and so then what is to be done? You have a deployable reflector with flexible heat pipes. So you increase more area, and using the deployable reflector, thermal radiator, and flexible heat pipes, so area gets increased and thermal requirements can be met with a larger spacecraft. This shows a picture where what I said, okay, mission, whether it's earth pointing or for scientific mission is initial pointing, control during velocity burns, whatever control is there, whether separate payload platform is there. See, many times for the ease of fabrication and to have the activities parallelly, you have a separate payload platform which gets integrated to the spacecraft. Okay, one way is to have one platform on which to mount the commissioning equipment, the spacecraft bus equipment, everything. But then it can go in a serial fashion. The other option is to have a communication, you two halves. One half is for the payload payload equipment. Other half is for the spacecraft bus equipment. So that activity goes on in parallel. And orbit is orbit planning, velocity burns, orbit maintenance, mission life, autonomy. Okay. Then structural constraints, which I said, launch vehicle imposed by the launch vehicle. Then there's a requirement on center of mass and overall inertia because that has a bearing on the structural loads during launch. Thermal dissipation, and of course, very important thing is thermal distortion and misalignment. In the orbit, when the satellite is there in the orbit, one portion of the satellite will be looking at sun, other will be looking at space. So this causes a distortion and misalignment of payloads and the sensors. So these are the things which has to be taken care of, studied, impacts analyzed, and the workaround to evolve and to see how to handle it. In the area of control system, what kind of stabilizations are required, whether it's passive or spinning or 3-axis, what are the sensors, okay, what is the process on ground for the attitude computation, what is done on board, what are the environmental talks, okay, what is the capability or requirement for the onboard computational computer, okay. As far as power is concerned, solar array sizing, solar array pointing requirements, propulsion, you have a choice whether how many thrusters are required, whether propellant is monopropellant or bipropellant. Then when the spacecraft has so many appendages, you have deployed, all the thrusters are mounted on the body, and the array is extended, array is rotating, reflectors are there. So when the thrusters is fired, its plume will impinge on the surface of reflector or the surface of the solar array. It will produce a disturbance torque. Apart from disturbance torque and forces, apart from physical damage, so you have to cant the thruster, how much canting is required, and that canting will result in a cosine loss for the thrust. So these are all part of the system engineering, evaluating, making trade-offs, and then come to a final design. Okay. So now I will come to the technical requirements very specifically. Okay, this shows a flow down of the technical requirements as a project starting from the project beginning till the end. Okay, in this picture, mission objectives and mission requirements, these are the top level requirements. Okay, these top level or high level requirements are decomposed into the functional requirements. Okay, so these top level requirements are decomposed into system functional requirements. Now these functional requirements, you have to also consider the environmental effect and the other design requirements and guidelines, costs and other aspects, and then you evaluate the system performance requirements. Now, this system performance requirements you break for each system, each package level to subsystem. Okay, for example, system is the spacecraft example, spacecraft pointing error should be 0.2 degree. Now, spacecraft, that is a total pointing requirement for the antenna. Now, how many things are coming to the picture? The sensors, accuracy, sensor alignments. Within the sensor, sensor detector is there. Within the sensor, detector you mount to the base plate, and there is some misalignment, inaccuracies. Then you mount the sensor to the spacecraft, you measure the alignment, there is some component. Then this, you mount the antenna reflector, it has a certain component of misalignment. So all this have to be assigned. Okay, how much? So you say that, okay, you allocate this much is what is required from each subsystem. And the subsystem functional and performance requirements are then distributed to subsequently the lower level equipment or elements. So this is how the process takes place. From the top level, you derive the top level is total overall requirements. Then they are broken into subsystem, then to the elements. Okay, and then there is a trade-off. There's a feedback. Okay, there's a feedback going on, and that's how this iterative process goes. So at each level decomposition, the total set of derived requirements must be validated against the customer's expectations or high level parent requirements through analysis, through testing. Those aspects will come later. This is a very specific example of a science pointing mission. You have a telescope looking at stars, some stars. Okay, now how will you do? You have a certain requirement that you want this accuracy. There are two elements, spacecraft and ground. Because when you get the star, when you make star observation, you get the data on ground. So you do some corrections on ground before you, so when you do the processing, and you are able to take care of certain known, what should I say? For example, when you are in the orbit, the spacecraft is the position is so much, but on ground you have a better knowledge. So you take care of that thing where the spacecraft was at the time of taking image. You correct for that one. Okay. Now you can do a better processing when you say the spacecraft is pointing in a particular direction. Using the sensor data on ground, you can do a better processing, and you can say this is where the actual source was pointing. So there are two elements, spacecraft and the ground processing. Now, spacecraft requirements, when it comes to attitude determination requirements and science knowledge axis, means the measured axis of the telescope with respect to the spacecraft reference axis. And then attitude determination tells from the attitude sensors where exactly how much is the error the body is having. So these are the two things. Now, science axis knowledge, bore side to science axis to attitude control, system reference. So this is again connected to the main structure and thermal distortion. This is connected to the instrument, thermal deformation, instrument calibration. Look at the attitude determination. You are doing attitude determination using star sensor and gyros. They have drifts. Okay. They have temperature sensitivity. The star sensor uses a catalog, accuracy of the star sensor catalog, the velocity aberration, gyro bias drift rate, all these things are playing a role, and each and everything has to be taken care of and properly evaluated and quantified. What are the types of system technical requirements? First of all, it is important to distinguish between three aspects or types of system technical requirements. The three technical requirements are functional requirements, performance requirements, interface requirements. Now, functional requirements define qualitatively what function need to be done to accomplish the objective. I'll give you an example in the next slide. And performance requirements define how well the system needs to perform this function in quantitative terms, in numbers. Okay, like I said, accuracy. Okay, to what level of accuracy the system should perform. These will represent the typical number. Okay, in quantitative terms. So, example of functional performance requirements. Initial functional statement says the functional requirements in an imaging satellite, for example, would express the functional requirements of step and stare in terms of high agility to be able to move from one imaging spot to the next imaging spot in the shortest time. See, in an imaging satellite, there is a requirement to take images, spot images of small area of interest, maybe 10 kilometer by 10 kilometer, and number of them. Okay, so you take an image of one spot, then you have to point the satellite in a different direction to take image of another spot, then point to the third direction to take an image in the third spot. So you want to take maximum number of spot images in a given time. So you want the satellite should move from one spot to the other spot quickly and settle down, and in terms of the pointing error and stability, settle down fast. So this is called high agility. So functional requirement states it should be highly agile. Now, this functional requirement with associated performance requirement would specify, for example, in terms of number, it says agility motion requirement of 90 degree in less than 20 seconds for a satellite of 300 kg mass or some mass, okay, TBD mass, and inertia approximately 60 kg meter square, using a tetrahedral configuration of control moment gyros. So this would specify for a given satellite, the agility motion requirement is 90 degree in less than 20 seconds. And for this mass, it can be accomplished. With this inertia, it can be accomplished with a given set of control moment gyros. Now, this requirement and this mass of the satellite and the inertia of satellite would impose a requirement on the control moment gyros. Control moment gyros are the muscle power of the satellite, which provide the torque to move the satellite. Now, this will impose a requirement on the CMGs, says each CMG will have a maximum momentum capacity of 2 Newton meter second at 6,000 RPM, generating a nominal torque of 2.4 Newton meter at 85 degree per second. And when you are arranging these CMJs in tetrahedral configuration, this will produce 6.3 Newton meter per second and 7.2 Newton meter torque, which will meet the requirement which you have stated, 90 degree motion in less than 20 seconds for a satellite of 300 kg mass and 60 kg meters per square. So the broad statement was agility requirement. Next functional requirement performance says agility should be so much motion in so many seconds for a satellite of this mass and this inertia. To achieve that one, what is the muscle power required? Muscle power comes from the control moment gyros. When I say muscle power means control torque capability. So this will work out and say this is what I need from the control actuator. Okay, so this is how the function, the requirements are derived. Then there are operational requirements which drive the functional requirements. These are mission timeline sequence, mission configuration, command and telemetry strategy. Now, when the satellite is launched into the orbit, after that one, a number of activities follow. Example, first you will maybe deploy a solar panel, then you may point the spacecraft to this sun pointing, then at a proper time you may make it earth pointing, then the question comes is to do the orbit raising. So many things are there, and during all these stages the satellite attitude is changing with respect to the ground station. Earth is moving. Say, for example, when the satellite is launched in a low Earth orbit, Earth is rotating. Satellite is also rotating in the orbit. The relative orientation of the ground station on the Earth is changing with respect to the satellite. Now the satellite orientation is also changing. Now the ground station and the satellite antennas should be able to look towards each other so that they can send and receive the data. Now what happens is, so what it means is, on the purpose of telecommand and telemetry, we have omni antennas, but omni antennas have a high low, okay, high angular coverage, but there are nulls. So you will put a null filling antenna. Now, where to locate the null filling antenna, that is comes as a part of the study from the mission timeline sequence, mission configurations. So these are the requirements, operational requirements, which imposes on the satellite how to locate the antenna, where to locate the antenna, in what direction to locate the beam should be pointing. Now, there are some functional requirements that are associated with ease of in-orbit operations. When I say ease of orbit operation support, I'll give you an example in the next slide. And there are some requirements which form diligent system engineering to handle any possible contingencies in orbit. See, we have to look at various failure conditions, where contingency conditions. So the overall design has to not only meet the basic requirement of the payload, it has also to meet the equipment failure, ease of operations, etc. So they also form a part of system engineering effort. Now, example of the ease of routine operations, a simple operation is there. In a communication satellite, we send the command for heater operation. Whenever the temperature sensor data is coming on ground, we look at the temperature data. When it is low, send a command to the satellite to make the heater on. When the temperature reaches the upper bound, you send a command to make it off. Okay. Now, this can be easily implemented in onboard computer. So you can bring down the load of the ground station. Less number of people in the ground station who will be monitoring the temperature and this and sending the command. So this is one aspect which can ease the requirement, which can ease the operation. Then there's also another requirement that each and every automatic function on board, there needs to be a ground override. That means you should be override that thing and carry that function to the ground command. Okay. So there's a basic, fundamental rule is there. Each and every automatic operation should have an override. Examples of diligent system engineering driving technical requirements. For example, there are thrusters. We should be able to fire any thruster with any duty cycle, any frequency, okay, that's the requirement. So normally thrusters fire in response to the onboard attitude errors to correct the orientation satellite. Our thrusters are fired for orbit correction purposes or orbit maintenance purposes. But there may be some situations, the contingent situation I will to say, a reflector or solar array doesn't deploy, it gets stuck. Now, by having a capability to manually select a thruster and fire at a given duty cycle and a given frequency, you can create a resonance situation which may help in releasing the stuck reflector or stuck solar array. So this is a capability to handle the contingency. There may be also a requirement to point the spacecraft to any arbitrary attitude through ground command, not necessarily sun pointing or earth pointing. There may be a situation where it requires you should be able to point anywhere, away from sun, away from earth, for whatever reason. Okay. I will tell you a simple example. In one of our spacecraft, solar array, there was a short in the solar array. And that short, because when the solar array is looking at the sun producing power, and short was causing all the system to get reset. Now the requirement is to point the solar array from sun so that no power is generated and no short will be experienced. So the system was designed to point the solar array in a direction away from sun. Normally you want to point the solar array towards the sun, but it was to point 180 degrees away from sun. Okay, so that this problem is overcome. So this is a thing. Then there is a safe mode. Any contingency, any failure of equipment may result in a loss of attitude. So under that condition, the spacecraft is required to be put in a safe mode. The safe mode is defined that you are generating power, maintaining the battery in charge condition, you have a proper antenna pattern coverage for TT&C, and minimal utilization of propellant. So this is what is called the safe mode condition requirements. So you have to define when to enter the safe mode and how to ensure that all these conditions are met. Now, there's also a requirement that following the safe mode, you should be able to recover the satellite so that the services can be resumed. Just imagine a satellite, you are watching Olympics, and there's a satellite experiences a problem, attitude is lost, and it enters the safe mode. And how desperate or how bad you feel. So from the user point of view, there's a requirement, once it enters the safe mode, you should be able to come out of the safe mode at the earliest. Continuing with that one, there's also a requirement that we should be able to manage the spacecraft with degraded performances under various failures, including loss of redundancy. Say the satellite is very expensive, including the launch and the satellite, it costs, $200, $300 million. And if there's a failure of equipment, you cannot write off that thing. So you would like it to be still usable with the degraded performance, which can maybe somewhere it can be tolerated. So there's a requirement to be able to manage the spacecraft with degraded performance under various failures, including loss of redundancy. We had a satellite INSAT 2E where both the air sensors had failed. after 3 years. Fortunately, we were able to use this satellite for next 8-9 years till the end of life, using the meteorological payload images, gyros, ground processing, ground support for next 10 years till the end of the life of the spacecraft, till the fuel got exhausted. And mind it, this spacecraft was used and was used by Intelsat under commercial agreement. There's another requirement, the reprogrammability of onboard computer in terms of both algorithm changes to accommodate various contingencies. Okay. One more requirement is there. The satellite should be able to survive without any telecommand uplink support. Supposing there is a fire in the ground station and you are not able to send the command. Satellite should be able to support itself without any ground support for a minimum of 8 hours or 10 hours, 20 hours. You can define and design accordingly. Because most of the requirements which comes for the satellite support from ground is in respect of attitude control system, thermal system, propulsion system, and battery state of charge. So all these things should be taken care of without any ground support for a minimum of 8 hours or 10 hours, or one can define the duration. So this is a requirement as part of system engineering. The system technical requirements, reliability. Reliability plays a very, very important role. See, functional performance interface requirements are very important, but they do not constitute the entire set of requirements necessary for project success. The space segment design elements must also survive and continue to perform in the mission environment and meet the requirements of reliability and quality assurance in terms of design robustness, fault tolerance and redundancy, design diversity for redundancy, especially in critical manned missions, verification, process, and workmanship guidelines. When I say design diversity, say in the spacecraft we have almost redundancy for every system. But when it comes to critical manned missions, instead of having two numbers for each equipment, we have much more. We have 3, 4, 5, depending on the criticality of the thing. Now, it is also a requirement that all the 4 or 5 equipments which you are putting for a particular, for the 4 or 5 numbers you are putting for a particular component should not be made by the same agency. There should be some from the same, some from the different agencies. Because if there's any design fault or design deficiency or anything is there, it doesn't carry it over to all the components, all the numbers you have. So design diversity becomes very, very important and it's very critical in a manned mission. So that's what is very important. What are interfaces? Can we break can we have 5 minutes break? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. We can meet at 11:55.
12 probably maybe okay. Maybe we can give some time for these people for drinking water and all.
Okay,
this.
okay, fine.
So 12 o'clock.
12 o'clock is fine.
Okay. Okay. Hello. Yes. Yes. No, I have not done because of some other work. I will do sometime later. Thanks. Not now. Not now. I'm not here. Okay. Can we, by that time, 5 minutes, can we update the license? So that at least you want to update the license, no? You are able to locate that model? Huh? In the simulation of that Infineon.
So I download the model, but I need this resistor connection capacitor.
Resistor capacitor. Value.
Yeah, schematics.
Yeah, probably I can take a printout here.
Yes.
Hello. Yeah, please. You please, can you send me the device thing? Huh? Yeah. Monday afternoon. I should Hmm. Okay, Monday afternoon, 2 hours. Okay, 2 hours. Okay. Probably the only thing is that, yeah, that's okay. I can just send me the quickly because I have to then confirm with other speakers. Huh? And then also I need, when is the exam and all those things, you know? But tentative is when? First week of September. Okay. Okay, because we should plan at least 2 modules before that. No, that's what only my. Okay. Okay. Thanks. What is that? Symphony. What? Hmm?
Let's check now. No, that will be some. Restart.
Reinstall. Okay, later on we will do that. Hmm? Anyway, now you are aware. This one you want me to send. I sent the PDF copy to you, no? Already. The circuit diagram.
The final.
One circuit diagram
Yeah.
I gave you, no? So with that, can you put that RC? Karthik,
Yes, sir.
Karthik,
Yes, sir. Tell me, sir. Tell me, sir. I'm audible.
hello, Karthik.
Yes, sir. Tell me, sir.
Sorry. See, this I got a message from your department
Okay,
that
sir.
rather than Wednesday, they want to have a on Monday.
Okay, sir.
So you have to announce to the student. I think Monday 1:30 onward. Malik Shah,
हाँ,
Okay, sir.
Monday,
they want
okay, fine.
Monday is okay,
Fine.
no?
Okay, fine. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Because there are some conflict in some other faculties requirements. So Karthik should announce this timetable again. Hmm?
Sure, sure. Definitely, sir.
Okay. Huh?
Okay.
So if the students have come, then can we start?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 12 o'clock. Can we start now?
Yes, sir.
We have to close at 12:30 today because I don't know whether this will be over or not, this topic. Because I'm midway only.
Okay, sir.
What time, Karthik, we can have?
Sir?
Up to what time we can extend?
Okay, sir. It's up. Yes, sir.
Because they may be having some other class, no?
Yes, sir. That's also there, sir.
So no, we'll take
15
it.
they have other things.
We'll take up in the next lecture.
Okay, sure, sir. No problem, sir.
Okay.
So shall we end the class right now, sir, or are you?
No, we'll continue up to 12:30.
Okay, sure, sir. Definitely, sir.
Malisha, we'll continue up to 12:30. Whatever
Okay.
is the length,
Yeah,
we'll-
when 12:30 is over there, just remind me in case I
Okay.
miss it. Okay, just
because
remind
we
me.
will be having some other classes, no? After
हाँ
that.
ठीक है ठीक है we will finish at 12:30 and continue on Monday and
Sure, sir. No,
Okay.
shall we start now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let me come to system interfaces, the type of interfaces. The system interfaces are both physical and functional. Physical interfaces are basically in terms of mechanical. And that is the dimensions, physical dimension of a box or a package, and how it is mounted on the spacecraft, what kind of a board or connectors or fasteners are used, and what is the stay out area, which area in the launch vehicle doesn't permit, So physical interfaces have to, define that physical dimensions and the means of attachments. Physical interfaces can also include a particular treatment on the surface of satellites underneath the package. See, there are many packages which have high power dissipation. Now, to improve the conductivity of the thermal conductivity for the heat transfer from the package to the spacecraft surface, you put thermal grease. So that interface also is defined. That is okay. A particular treatment is required at the base before mounting the package on the spacecraft surface. You have to give a thermal grease treatment. So that is another. That is also part of physical. And the functional interface includes the electrical. That is how the data transfer takes place between two interconnecting systems. That that definition will be in terms of signal voltage level, current sinking capability, input output impedance, any RF EMI or EMC interference. So these are that functional interface also will include all this thing will be properly need to be defined. Then, of course, the data transfer example, simple example is 1553, but there are many other standards. So you have to define what standards you follow to transfer the data from one subsystem to the other subsystem. Maybe a existing system may be designed to handle one type of a data transfer, and the new system may require a different thing. Then we have to resolve that issues. There are interfaces between various systems are called external interfaces. Between two subsystems, system A and system B, when you connect, that is called an external interface. Now, within a subsystem or within a package, all the interfaces need to be defined. For example, in the realization of onboard computer system or satellite bus management unit, there are different engineers will be working on different circuit functionalities. For example, you need a thruster driver card, you need a wheel interface card, you need a thermal heater management, you need to interface with the TTNC front end modulator, demodulator, telecommand processing, distribution, telemetry data formatting, transmission, etc., etc. Now, different engineers are working on different cards. So there also you have to define that from one card the information is being received and passed on to the next thing. You have to define all the signals, all the voltages, all the impedances, everything has to be defined. Okay. So then there's an interface between satellite system and a launch system that is defined by what is called interface specification document or interface control drawing or document. It's called a ICD, launch vehicle ICD. Okay. So interfaces are, it's not just a system. Okay. Everything has to be defined as a part of system engineering. What is different about space system? Two major differences. One is the environment, other is unattended operation. Space environment places additional constraints on the satellites and the components and parts that make up the system. First of all, they have to work in a near total vacuum. So this puts a restriction. Ambient thermal inputs varying from direct sun illumination in one direction to near absolute zero of the deep space in other. That is, when the spacecraft is there, one face is looking at the sun, the backside is looking at the space. That is very cold and this is very hot. So that has to be taken care of. Then passage of the satellites through belts of charged particles requiring analysis of total dose of radiation and radiation effects. For example, Van Allen belt. When the satellite passes through the Van Allen belt, so you have to analyze what is the dosage, what is the impact, how to radiation hardened component or the box or the package, what kind of thickness is required, where is the lead coverage is to be there, which package, which IC, those have to be addressed. Then there is a surface and internal charging as a result of ESG. That is a part, some part of the satellite is looking at the sun and part is looking at the space, and there's a charge buildup. And when the charge builds up, there's a electrostatic discharge causing upsets in the systems. So that has to be addressed, how the ESG has to build up, has to be controlled. Then atmospheric effect, atmospheric control and quality, that is atomic oxygen, and can, especially can corrupt, can degrade the solar cells interconnection. So that has to be also addressed very carefully. Then contamination and crew-induced loads for manned mission. During fabrication of packages, if there's not a proper atmosphere, proper air conditioning, proper humidity, then there's a possibility of fungus growth. And fungus growth will also result in the package not working properly. So that also has to be controlled during assembly and fabrication. Then, of course, the last one is the orbit debris, how to handle the minimize the debris. There are standard, there are international requirements, and those have to be complied with. Those are basically more for the launch vehicle and to some extent for the satellites also. See, for all this thing, to handle all these issues, we need to have a proper documentation which spells out the procedures and the processes to be followed, okay, for different elements of the satellite. These discipline areas levy requirements, guidelines, engineering practices on system elements regarding electromagnetic interference, electromagnetic compatibility, grounding, radiation, shielding, contamination, protection, reliability, outgassing, and all those things. When the spacecraft goes to the space, there's a lot of epoxy and a lot of material being used, and it will be, in space you will have a lot of outgassing, and this outgassing can affect the sensors, can affect the cameras for imaging operation, so, and degrade their performance. So this outgassing has to be controlled. Okay, material evaluation has to be done on ground before its usage in the spacecraft. Then there are also requirement of grounding, so that you have minimum EMI, EMC, and the upsets on the spacecraft. And these grounding requirements are applicable even to the ground support equipment, not only to the satellite. When you are using ground support equipment, when you are using a crane, or when you are using somebody is putting a connector to the spacecraft for the ground checkout system, he has to have proper strap. Okay, those issues also have to be addressed very carefully. Then there is the launch loads, high vibration, acoustic, shock, other environments during launch require careful characterization, design, and testing to prevent irretrievable failures during launch and early on-orbit operations. All the space systems are required to operate unattended with health monitoring on ground control station. For that reason, if a component fails, only ground actions can be carried out. Such action must usually be pre-planned and take advantage of provisions designed into the hardware, such as redundant hardware or reloadable software. As a result, satellites are usually designed to eliminate or at least minimize single-point failures. When the redundant hardware fails, the satellite may no longer provide the intended capability. Therefore, high reliability parts are required to be used. Okay, one of the very important requirements is high reliability. Further care is to be taken to verify that the hardware has positive margin with respect to the launch and space environment described above. See, in order to minimize the cost, all this small university satellite, nanosat, CubeSat, microsat, they have a tendency to use, off-the-shelf, okay, components, not high reliability components because of the cost thing. So you have to have a proper assessment while using those components. When a software defect affects operation, the satellite must usually be capable of being placed in the safe mode until the defect can be identified and corrected. Therefore, software that could cause the irretrievable loss of mission is validated through such steps as extensive simulation with flight hardware in the loop testing. Balancing such factors as performance, cost, and reliability is a system engineering task for all systems. Many times, in order to minimize the cost, there's a tendency to take risks. Okay, but those risks needs a proper assessment and evaluation. A few examples of system engineering. A few examples. Okay, you see here there's 3 satellites shown in the picture. Okay, the spacecraft control techniques influences and in turn get influenced by the overall spacecraft configuration and mission or payload requirement. In this picture, 3 pictures you see, there are solar arrays on both north side and north and the south side. This is called a symmetrical configuration. This configuration is used for commissioning satellites. But you see the picture here. This satellite has a payload, meteorological payload, VHRR, very high resolution radiometer, which has a infrared detector which needs to be cooled at 100 degree Kelvin. Now, there's one way is to put a mechanical cooler, electrical cooler with a motorized like a refrigerator. Other is to use a passive cooler, because passive cooler will be very, very, simple and without any chance of any failure. So what it requires is passive cooler should look towards the deep space. No input should come to it. So you cannot put a solar array on both the sides, because any reflection from the solar array, if solar is mounted here, any reflection of solar array will send an input to the cooler, and the cooler will not be able to maintain 100 degree Kelvin temperature. So in this configuration, the satellite arrays are put on one side. But once you put the arrays on one side, it becomes unsymmetrical configuration. Solar radiation pressure torque acting in the satellite will degrade the performance of the control system on one side, and also result in a propellant usage, excessive propellant usage for the control purpose, and that will affect the life of the satellite, beside accuracies. So then how to do it? You come up with a solution. You have a deployable solar sail, conical sail, and sail is designed such that this tapered surface of the cone, when you extend it, it will fall outside the cooler. So any reflection coming from the sun from here will never enter the cooler. So that's why it comes as the deployable solar sail has come into the picture. Understood? No reflection will enter the cooler because this is a tapered surface, conical surface, and this conical surface will fall outside. So no matter, no input will enter, no reflection will enter the cooler. Now we had a few problems in orbit with this configuration. We were not very successful. Okay. Because there were some tearing took place, and there were deployment problems, and there were issues like that one. So this is not a very successful. So then the idea was what to do. Okay, in this satellite, the power was very high because it was a multi-purpose satellite. Communication is there, data, the VHR is there, high resolution radiometer is there, okay, and remote data reception terminals are there, okay. So this was not very successful. So idea was, so why don't we make a satellite only for the purpose of meteorological payload? Okay, so the power will be minimum. So in this configuration, you have one solar array, one panel is there, just to maintain the satellite, just to support the requirement of the payload and the bus. And in this unsymmetrical configuration, the disturbance torques will be there, solar pressure torque will be there, but they're very small and can be compensated by the magnetic torques. There are magnetic torques in the put, which can be the current can be controlled with the torque to compensate the disturbance caused by this thing. This magnetic torque will interact with the earth's magnetic field, will produce a torque to compensate for this disturbance torque. So that's how this is how the system engineering comes into picture. That how to evolve it, how to take care of the configuration issues, how to optimize the configuration, how to minimize the various issues, and optimize the payload performance. This is another one, another configuration. See here, you have this kind of a configuration for the solar arrays compared to this one. Now, the disadvantage in this one is, supposing one side solar array doesn't deploy, this is high power satellite. This will be very, very high, large disturbance torque produced. So to minimize that one, you come up with this configuration, because in this case, the solar radiation pressure, center of pressure, in this case, if the one panel doesn't deploy, that distance to spacecraft CG will be less than in this case. So this is the various configurations you optimize, in this manner. These are all the part of the system engineering effort. Another example is I'll give you. Spacecraft is injected into a transfer orbit by the launch vehicle, communication satellite, and then you fire the liquid apogee motor and raise the orbit, make it circular geostationary orbit. Okay, this is what normally is there. Now, so when the satellite is put in this transfer orbit has a period of typically 10 and a half hours. Okay, so what is the attitude control should be there to use during this transfer orbit? One option is to use spinning satellite that will come to minimum propellant. But spinning satellite has a requirement that spin inertia should be greater than the transverse inertia. Now you are trying to pack so much of equipment, make a satellite to pack so much of equipment, optimize it so that you have, you can maximally utilize it. You don't have the freedom to place the equipment to get that inertia properties, required inertial properties. So what to do? So if the initial properties are not met, the spacecraft will be unstable. Spacecraft will be unstable. So what to do? The alternative will be to use a 3-axis stabilization in transfer orbit. Now, 3-axis stabilization will need the use of inertial grade gyros to provide 3-axis information. Because what happens is, now what happens? Look at this picture. In this picture, the standard launch window is midnight. What it means is the apogee, the Earth, satellite, the apogee and the sun will be nearly along the line, 180-degree angle. Okay. There are, depending on mission to mission, that's the standard launch window. Now, when when you decide a launcher, there's always a requirement you study that I can't accept midnight. I want 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 6 a.m. 6 a.m. is the best. Then in that case, I can use sun sensor and earth. When you are finding a Koji motor, Earth sensor is looking at the Earth, and sun is looking at the sun. You have a simple configuration. But when the sun is along this thing, sun and Earth will give you only 2 axis information, not the 3rd axis information. So 3rd axis information you have to utilize from the gyro. Now gyros have an inherent drawback of drift, so which needs to be calibrated before maneuver. Okay, so because of, and what do? So you have to have a 3rd sensor using which you can calibrate the gyros and then use it at the appropriate time of firing of the lamp. So for that purpose, you say that midnight is not acceptable, I want 2 a.m. Okay, provided the co-passenger, other satellite also is able to accept. So these are the trade-offs which take place with the launch vehicle. Okay, and you can use sun with the sensor with a wide field of view and our sensor in that condition. But other alternative is instead of sun sensor, star sensor. If you use star sensor, then there is no launch vehicle constraint on the satellite. You can launch the satellite any time of the day. Okay, so that's how this trade-off have to be carried out. Now, other aspect is, we need very high pointing, especially in a payload with a imaging payload. This shows pictorially, conceptually, a spacecraft. Say, you just imagine this is a structure, a spacecraft. Here, there's a telescope looking at the stars. Here, there's an antenna which is transmitting the data to the Earth, which is moving antenna. Here is a solar array which is rotating and pointing towards sun to generate power. And here is a control system element which is rotating at high speed. Now, I'll look at this one. Any dynamic unbalance or static unbalance when the component is rotating, flywheel is rotating at high RPM, will produce disturbance input at the rotational frequency at the base, which get transmitted to the satellite, and it will affect the payload. Similarly, any motion of this antenna will also affect the payload. Any rotation of solar array will affect the payload. Now, all these disturbances are creating a problem. So this will affect the pointing and the stability of the payload. See, many imaging payloads require, scientific payloads require to look at the source for a long time, a few minutes, few hours, few days, deep, very, very faint sources. So what to do? One way is attenuation scheme require combination of disturbance torque reduction at source, means try to balance this wheel as much as possible so that the residual torques are coming minimum. Other is to isolate the disturbance torque, means you put a disturbance isolator here, you put a disturbance isolator here. Okay, then put a disturbance isolator here. Okay, so you can so that payload gets isolated from all the sources of disturbances. Now, other is to use a combination of passive and active dampings, structural dampings. Okay, input command shaping means when you are slowing the spacecraft from one source to the other source, you have a very smooth profile for the torquing, so that there's no excitement of the structure, and which keeps on remaining, and passive damping will take care of it. So under such circumstances, the recommendation is when multiple disturbances cause jitter, the best solution is to isolate the payload itself. So you put a isolation payload, some kind of a damper, some kind of a isolator, so that it will not transmit any disturbance from all this thing, and the payload will have a optimal performance. So this is again what choices have to be made is a part of the trade-offs carried out by the system engineering. System validation. Okay. Say now all the performance requirements that are put on the spacecraft have to be validated, have to be verified and validated. So it can be done by examination, test, demonstration, or analysis. Requirement documentation, in fact, specify the development phase and method of verification. As the satellite progresses, how you carry out the validation step by step till the final product. Okay, that requirement documentation spells out that one. I'll give you a simple example of attitude control, design, validation, and test limitation. Various components of ADC system are tested for their functional performance and allocated specification. That is, you have a sensor, Earth sensor, sun sensor, star sensor, monitor wheel, reaction wheel, control moment gyros. All this can be tested at bench level using simulated sources of Earth, Sun, etc. And the performance can be validated at respective subsystem level. But when the spacecraft, entire spacecraft comes, is so massive, we can't, move the spacecraft. It's impossible. There's no way. In earlier times, when we started doing the thing, we used to have an air-bearing platform. That is, the spacecraft had a spherical cup which is floating on a cushion of air, and it could rotate. But that is applicable only for a small satellite. But in bigger satellite, that becomes impossible. So you cannot test the spacecraft performance. You cannot work out the spacecraft performance, test for it at a completely spacecraft level. So what we have to do, we have to follow a very systematic process to make sure, during the design process, to make sure that we will achieve our required performance parameters. So first step consists of mathematical model of satellite dynamics and analysis, including flexibility, fuselage, etc. And you carry out the digital simulation, including digitization, quantization, sampling delays, emulating onboard computation delays with parametric variation for uncertainties in the satellite dynamic model. Say, when I say satellite has so much of inertia, our satellite solar array has a vibration frequency so much, or a modal mass so much, or modal inertia so much. These are all calculated parameters. They are not measured parameters. So there is an uncertainty. How good is your model of computation? Okay. How good is your input? Okay. So there is a lot of uncertainty. So what we do is, during the simulation, we carry out all a very detailed simulation, varying each parameters, and see the effect and see the system performance. Okay, so like you can say Monte Carlo type of simulation. Then spacecraft requirement for onboard implementation, including cycle time available, margin, etc., is also assessed. Then both hardware and software tests at package level as well as onboard computer in loops are carried out. Means we carry out in a OILS is again a simulation. That means we simulate the dynamics, the sensors, the actuators in the computer, and we we connect the onboard computer system where all these control algorithms are mentioned, controllers are mentioned, connect and see by simulation, that is called OIS, onboard computer in loop, and evaluate the performance. That is basically performance of the onboard computer system. Then these performance numbers during either digital simulation or IS or HIS are good to the extent how accurate our satellite inertial properties, inertia parameters, flexibility parameters are known. So great care is needed and exercised for their computation. Okay, this is the test setup of the onboard OIS, onboard computer in loop simulation, which I think will be addressed later. I'll skip it. Now, there's one more thing where we try to simulate the functionality of all the hardware. In OIS, we simulated sensors. Here, we use actual sensor, actual wheels, actual OBC, but the difference is we are simulating the spacecraft dynamics in the computer. Okay, this is a 3-axis servo table, very accurate, very sensitive servo table. There are 3 gimbals representing pitch roll jar. On this central platform, we mount sensors. That are sensor, sun sensor, star sensor, the gyros, 3-axis gyro package. Those sensors are mounted on this one. Okay, now this sensor data through the slip rings is fed to the, say, this picture shows how. Basically, only sensors are mounted on the servo table, and there is an Earth simulator, okay, which is nothing but a hot plate. Earth, as seen from space, is a hot body. Okay, so this is simulated by a hot plate of proper dimensions. Sun simulator is there, which simulates the sun spectral characteristics, sun intensity, that is there. And star simulator again is a very difficult thing. So you put a star sensor, then there is a star simulator. Okay, so that the star simulator and star sensor are in the star sensor and star simulator put in the star sensor is not put on the servo table. Star sensor is put on the separately away from the table. Through the slip rings, the sensor data is taken to the onboard computer. Onboard computer will compute the correction torque to be applied in response to the sensor errors. So this computes the torque. This torque is fed to the ground computer where the spacecraft dynamics are computed. The dynamics dynamics model resides in response to the torque signal coming from the onboard computer. This dynamics model will say this is much error is there and computer should be driven by this much error to close the loop. So there is in response to this OBC signal, it computes the correction angles, and the table is driven in proportion to those angles and close the loop and make the sensor errors 0. This is how the spacecraft is validated. Again, I told this dynamic computer, the dynamic model which resides here depends on the properties of inertia, flexibility, how good they are. The output will be as good as this model is there. But only thing is, here you are testing onboard computer, onboard sensors, onboard everything in a closed loop fashion, except dynamics is in the computer. So that is the advantage. This I have already, I'll skip it, I have spoken. Then system level satellite design validation test. Again, first structure subsystem. Static, again, this follows 2-step process. One is the static and dynamic load prediction for satellite main structure at the base of various subsystems during launch. Comparison of these loads prediction with measured data during satellite dynamic vibration testing. Similarly, if you make prediction and you compare with the testing done during thermo-vacuum testing of the spacecraft. So these tests are done at spacecraft level. Okay, here there's a picture of thermo-vacuum test. The entire spacecraft is put in the thermo-vacuum. Space conditions are simulated, and the payloads are operated, and the external heat load from sun is simulated, and how the evaluation is done. Here the spacecraft is sitting on a vibration table, and it is vibrated, okay, based on the launch vehicle, the base load in the inputs, and the evaluation of the monitoring is done at various places, and evaluation is done, and performance comparison is done between the analysis and the tests. This is compact antenna test measurement test. This is again a very, very complex facility. Okay, here again the RF performance of the payload and TTSC system is validated at the integrated spacecraft level test. It is called a compact antenna test facility. Okay, emerging trends toward small and nano satellite and related technology.
Shall we stop here?
Okay, I think we can
Or-
stop. We can only 5 minutes. Okay, I think we will stop here.
Or you want how much? 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
Karthik, can we continue for another 5-10 minutes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
No,
Now-
students,
yeah.
they don't have any this thing conflict with other lecture?
So it's okay, sir. No issues. Another 5 minutes is fine, sir.
Okay, 5 minutes only.
Okay.
5 slides.
Yeah,
only.
yeah, that's okay.
Say, okay. Currently, most of satellites worldwide are large and heavy. Recently, a paradigm shift in the design and architecture of remote sensing spacecraft has resulted in the emergence of small satellites, typically less than 500 kg satellites. Future small, low-cost, high-value missions are the only viable path to diverse series of missions like Earth observation, astronomical observation, reconnaissance campaign for asteroids and comets. CubeSat capabilities continue to increase, and there is a considerable momentum to transition from simple scientific missions into dedicated observation and interplanetary missions that generate valuable science and utility. One of the constraints in the small and nano satellite is the propulsion system. The existing propulsive system, they have to be using basic bipropellants or monopropellants, their capability is not sufficient for the nano satellites or small satellites. So for that purpose, electric propulsion is a very suitable and viable option. Near-term options for primarily propulsion, especially for interplanetary mission, asteroids and comets, can be iodine or xenon Hall thruster. And another important thing is solar sail, a passive means of propelling the spacecraft for interplanetary travel. This shows a CubeSat growing configuration. This consists of three, each CubeSat is 10 centimeter by 10 centimeters, so there are three of them stacked together to increase the volume and accommodate more bus element and the payload element. Similarly, deployable and antenna arrays solar arrays are there. And so this configuration shows 56 watts of power can be generated here. Another configuration is there. Here it shows the inside view of it. There is a propellant tank, xenon. You can have an electrical propulsion, iodine or xenon tank for the electrical propulsion purposes. Here this shows a solar sail. It's called solar kites. This is again a satellite made by Surrey. Okay, here there's a deployable for a nanosat. Deployable telescope is there. Here there are, this is a 6-phase hexagonal phase. There are solar panels on 6 and deployed 6 panels are there. Okay, these are the satellites which have been made by Surrey. You can see solar cell. Now I said electric propulsion is one thing. Solar cell an alternative to low thrust electric propulsion for interplanetary travel. Solar cell provides an alternate means of providing low thrust due to its propellant-less nature compared to the electric propulsion. These are basically large lightweight reflectors, large surfaces. Thrust is produced by the impingement of massless photons carrying electromagnetic energy from sun on the surface of these reflectors. And thrust produced is very small. You can imagine the thrust produced, would be in millinewton or micronewton, depending on the size of the thing. But this thrust, over time, its effect accumulates. That is the whole concept. Solar radiation pressure, besides solar power density, is proportional to 1 by r square. As the distance from sun increases for the satellite, the solar radiation pressure decreases in proportion to 1 by r square. On Earth, or you can say geostationary orbit or low Earth orbit, the solar radiation pressure is 4.6 into 10 to power minus 6 Newton per meter square. Okay, just imagine. This solar radiation pressure is basic solar power density, okay, which is when the solar power we received on Earth is 1350 watts per square meter. As you go, so that is one aspect. The distance plays, the distance 1 over r square, it will be proportionately 1 over r square, it will be going down. So 1350 will become 1/4 at Mars, at a distance at a distance from Sun to Mars. Okay, so with larger distance, it keeps on decreasing proportional to 1 by r square. It also depends on the surface properties, reflectivity. If surface is very reflective, then because photons are impinging, reflecting back, reaction of the reflection increases the thrust. Absorptivity, diffusivity, these are the optical properties, how effective these surface properties will make this, the thrust. This is a diploid panel. Here is a one solar cell. Okay, in this one you see the mass is light solar cell stored is, okay, size is 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 30 centimeter, mass is 5 kg. Diploid solar cell size is 4.5 micron thick, less than the width of a human hair. Solar cell, 4 triangular cells forming a square connected with the cobalt sail boom length 4 meter. Okay, sail width is 5.6 meter by 5.6 meter. Total area is 32 meter square. Acceleration for this mass is 0.058 millimeter per second square. On Earth, the thrust is roughly equivalent to a paper clip resting on your hand. Okay? Can you imagine? You take a paper clip, put it on your hand, that much force it is acting, the clip is putting on your hand, that is a force, that is a thrust which is produced by this solar cell. You can say very, very small. But when this is acting continuously for days, months, years together, then it results in a cumulative with a large delta V change, velocity change. And interplanetary mission would require there will be continuity requirement. You want the spacecraft to look at the Earth for data transmission. You want the solar cell to look at the sun. So there is a gimbal system, 2-axis gimbal system, which meets both the requirements. Spacecraft will be looking in one direction, required direction, and the sail will be looking in the direction of the sun. Okay, so these are, this type of systems are being planned and being used for various missions. Okay, now I have come to the last slide, concluding remarks. System engineering encompasses the entire spectrum of activities, starting from analysis of customer requirements, translating them into performance or functional requirements in space environments, including reliability, redundancy, and operational aspects, design iteration to manufacturing, assembly, integration, testing, and launch. One can simply say for such a complex task that system engineering is the art and science of developing a safe and balanced design in the face of multiple and sometimes conflicting requirements and constraints, including many times opposing interests from designers and human factors. Because whenever changes are required, everybody tries to run away from it. Okay, so there are, and sometimes people are attached to their designs. Okay, they don't want to change it, so it becomes a very conflicting requirement. Okay, so this is becomes very sensitive sometimes. In short, in summary, I would say, in a way, the system engineering is a logical way of thinking. Thank you. That completes my talk.
Thank you, Malik Sahab. Students, if they have any question, they can ask.
You can ask now, or you can ask me by email also.
Email also you can.
Okay, I will try to answer. Okay.
Okay.
I know this was a very abstract topic, but nevertheless, it is quite,
Quite informative.
It is a must. When you get into the design and satellite business, all this you need to know how conflicting requirements tend to be. Okay, I mean, general feeling is that, yeah, this satellite is used for communication, or this is this thing, but what goes into it, why it takes time. Okay, the evolution, it starts from, from the black box to the end product. Okay. So, if you have any question, please feel free to send me an email. I will try to answer. And
Next lecture, Malik Sahab, will be on
on the mission,
aspects.
mission, and I will tell you. The mission planning, analysis, and operations. Okay, that also will be something similar to this one. And the third lecture will be on the third lecture will be on the orbital mechanics. Orbital mechanics, and then we'll go into the specifics of control system and all. So, second lecture will be also to introduce you to mission aspects. What are the things which go in the mission, and etc. But the third lecture will be basically introduction to orbital mechanics. Okay, and that will contain a lot of mathematics also, a lot of basic fundamentals and all those things.
I understand to some extent they have undergone the course on orbital mechanics. But
Okay.
however, from our satellite point of view, it could be a little different. So it's better to go through.
No, if they have already gone through orbital mechanics course, then maybe I will start with the specifics.
I don't know. Student can comment.
Yes, sir. We have undergone orbital mechanics in 6th semester, sir. Elements of orbital mechanics.
So you can go through. In case if you find it is like a repeating, then you can request.
No, then I will skip that portion because they have already gone through that one. I will go through the different type of orbits and remote sensing and those aspects, practical aspects I will deal with, and then go to the controls. Okay. Anything you have done in the controls, you tell me, so that are you familiar with what type of disturbances, what kind of a frame of references are there, what kind of active control, passive control?
No, that I don't think.
No, sir, we didn't learn.
No, sir.
Okay, I will
Better,
cover
I
those
think,
things.
you
Okay, I will cover those
Okay.
things.
So
Okay.
Monday, I think Karthik can confirm it is 1:30, correct?
Well,
Yes, sir.
Monday lecture,
Yes, sir.
Karthik can confirm it is at 1:30, and please pass and please confirm again from the department it is 1:30 and pass on the message to all students as well as to us.
Sure, sir. I'll do that, sir. It's 1:30 only, sir.
Okay.
We'll circulate the message.
I think that's what he was suggesting, but however, you just confirm.
okay, fine. It's fine with me. Fine
It's
with me.
confirmed, sir, that it is 1:30 only, sir. That's the updated
Okay.
timetable, sir.
Okay.
1:30 to 3:30.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, sir. Thank you, Malik sir.
Okay.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you all students. Please be attentive, and I am sure that our Professor Karthik is sending all the information, recorded information to all students. So please go through. In case anything is there, you can always communicate through email. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.